Hearthstone Battlegrounds took Hearthstone, made all the minions attack randomly on the board, and somehow improved the experience. In today's video, we're taking a nostalgic look back at some of those minions that are now forgotten. Up first is Imp Mama. Imp Mama was a Tavern Tier 6 minion in Battlegrounds. That said, whenever this minion takes damage, summon a random demon and give it taunt. Imp Mama was one of those cards that had the potential to win you games on its own. And if you got it early enough, not only would it help you win games on its own, but would allow you to deal insane amounts of damage to your opponent early enough to just completely ruin their game, right? If you manage to get an Imp Mama off something like a Shifter Xeris super early, you were not only blessed with a big minion with 6 attack and 10 health, but you also were now summoning minions every time it took damage. And because it's early, your opponent's minions are small enough that none of them kill this Imp Mama. Nowadays, a 6/10 is like a 4-drop if you really want it to be, right? Back then, there's like 2 attack and 3 attack minions at this point on the board, and that's it. And Imp Mama is just summoning those minions as it takes damage from those minions, and so you're just getting further and further ahead. One of the only things, quite frankly, that balanced Imp Mama, besides it being a tier 6 minion, was having Annihilan Battlemaster in its pool, which is another incredibly nostalgic demon on its own right, gaining health for each hero health your character is missing, getting a big health minion that you could taunt up or buff to then have more attack, and was kind of a nice tool that would help you recover from, say, maybe your opponent dealing a ton of damage to you with an Imp Mama. Another synergy that you'd often see with Imp Mama is Soul Juggler. Soul Juggler would take these demons that are dying from Imp Mama, or just Imp Mama itself when it would die, and the Soul Juggler would deal 3 damage to a random enemy minion. So whatever demons you have that die, Soul Juggler is just shooting more and more out. So whether it be an Imp Mama board or just a demon board, heck, even if it's an Annihilan Battlemaster board where you have huge health and huge attack demons rather than small token ones, you're still able to sneak a Soul Juggler in and have it deal 3 damage to a random enemy minion. Literally any time a demon dies. This is one of those cards that for the longest time was a staple in demon comps because, like I said before, not every minion is very large at this point in Battlegrounds. At the beginning, things were a lot simpler and health was a lot lower, and so this 3 damage, given enough chances, was fairly impactful on the game. Imp Mama, Annihilan Battlemaster, and Soul Juggler are 3 very iconic and potentially forgotten minions in Hearthstone Battlegrounds history. There are hundreds of cards that could have made this video, so I encourage you to talk about any I don't get to in the comments, as I could never fit them all into one video. I unsuccessfully tried many different ways of trimming the overall number down, and ended up just having to grab a mix of cards I was nostalgic for, and some I had forgotten entirely. With that said, up first we have what I think is the perfect card for this video. I am both nostalgic for this card, and had completely forgotten about Arcane Cannon. Arcane Cannon is an extremely unique minion. Quite frankly, I think it may be the only minion in Battlegrounds history to ever say the words "can't attack." If that's not true, I'm sure someone will let me know in the comments, but I can't find any others. Beyond it being unique in the fact that it can attack, it also deals 2 damage when adjacent minions next to it attack. So similar to Soul Juggler, when a minion next to Arcane Cannon attacks, Arcane Cannon deals 2 damage to a random enemy minion. Arcane Cannon is one of those cards where I am both nostalgic for it because, like, it was kind of cool and unique, but also I had forgotten about it because this card existed for 2 months. That's it. It was in the game for 2 months and then entirely removed. And then as far as I could tell, the can't attack words have never come back on a card. Whether that be classified as a failed experiment or not, I suppose is up to you. But that's really all I can say about it. It was designed to just be early on your board so that you could have your first and third minion attack before Arcane Cannon got hit, and had the can attack keyword allowing you to do that. And then as quickly as it came, it left. One unique fun fact about Arcane Cannon is, for the sake of like what tribes it was allowed to be in the game instead of just all of them, it was actually classified with pirates. So if pirates were in, it could be in. If pirates were out, it could not be. That was likely due to its highly synergistic nature with cards like Scallywag. Another pirate that I had forgotten about is Seabreaker Goliath. Seabreaker Goliath is another card that could have been kind of neat to synergize with Arcane Cannon, but was much more commonly used to synergize with a card like Eliza. This is another interesting minion that I had forgotten about, partially because it's, I think, probably just largely underwhelming. Like, Wind Fury is the part of this that makes a lot of sense because of something like Arcane Cannon or, more realistically, Eliza. But it also had Overkill on it, which is a really rare and maybe even underutilized keyword in Battlegrounds. This is just a 6/7 that attacks twice, and if you've managed to buff it, or it's managed to buff itself through Eliza's, could then buff your whole board, stacking up those other buffs. So it's the kind of minion you'd want to hit early off a triple reward, so that the original minion stats were big enough that it could hit like a 2/3 or a 3/4, buffing your entire board, or at least your other pirates, and then allowing you to kind of stabilize or get stronger from there. But eventually it just became Eliza fodder. I'm not really sure if this card was like super good or not. I assume it wasn't. I pretty accurately remember now that I've looked at it and researched about it, that it essentially boiled down to just great if you hit it early to buff your pirates, but then quickly fell off and you'd either get rid of it or just throw it at the beginning and hope it attacked twice. But yeah, probably a card that you also forgot is it was only in the game for like a year and a bit, and it was removed over 4 years ago. A card with Wind Fury that was much more common in Battlegrounds' early days was the bonkersly busted Amalgadon. Amalgadon was an all-type minion that read Battlecry, randomly adapt for each different friendly minion type. Poison, Wind Fury, Divine Shield, etc. Amalgadon could do it all. No matter what your situation was, you'd happily replace a minion on your board with it, because it was just better. This is like the experience I had with today's video sponsor, the FlexiSpot C7 Max. Much like how Amalgadon fits comfortably into any board, thanks to its many adapts, so too does the C7 Max fit comfortably into anyone's life, thanks to its many adjustments. This card enabled some of the most powerful late game boards we have ever seen at a time where Hearthstone Battlegrounds was at its weakest power level. It could have Divine Shield, Poison, and just be buffed by literally any card because it had every type. So say you were playing something like early Battlegrounds Murlocs, using cards like Murloc War Leader and Tidehunter. You'd be doing something like Murlocs, and then you transition into Amalgadon late game. You could also be playing something like Demons, and then suddenly your Amalgadon synergizes with your Mal'Ganis or Felbat. Regardless of what your board is, you are happy to slot in Amalgadon. And regardless of who you are, the many adjustments of the C7 Max in areas such as the headrest, backrest, and armrest will keep you happy, whether sitting for a brief moment or for most of the day, like I always am. Being able to sit in a proper comfy chair is one of the best feelings, just like how buffing your board with Murlocs is just like one of the best feelings that Battlegrounds has ever had to this day. It's just buffing a wide board of Murlocs. I mean, that just hits different. You know what else hits different? The lumbar support finally stopping me from slouching all these years. What a phenomenal improvement to my enjoyment when sitting comfortably and sitting upright to get work done. I used to spend so much energy constantly forcing my posture up. Now, the chair helps do some of that for me by properly supporting me. War Leader and Tidehunter are just constructed cards, so it's unlikely anyone's forgotten about them, but for me, the Battlegrounds nostalgia hits with these super hard. I don't necessarily have the same nostalgic feelings for Amalgadon because you can essentially get Divine Shield poisonous things for the history of the game, even if sometimes it's more venom than poisonous. You don't really need it to be this powerful. So you probably didn't forget about Amalgadon because of how much it terrorized your experience, but ultimately it is an iconic early game Hearthstone Battlegrounds minion that players were always pleased to add to their board. And if you're in the market for a new chair, you'll be pleased with an upgrade to the FlexiSpot C7 Max. Another powerful keyword that Amalgadon made use of was Divine Shield. Since early Battlegrounds, Divine Shield has been a key part of the game. One such example is Bolvar Fireblood. Divine Shield, after a friendly minion loses Divine Shield, gain +2 attack. The way this card would work is you'd synergize with other Divine Shield minions, and then when your other Divine Shield minions would take damage, Bolvar would gain 2 attack. And because he was Divine Shield himself, you'd want him to have as much attack as possible, so you'd put him on the far right of your board, hoping to get as much attack before he was attacked as possible. Cards you'd synergize with him primarily were mechs, because they also had Divine Shield. A good example would be the original Deflectobot in Cobalt Guardian. Cobalt Guardian is essentially just Deflectobot, but it doesn't gain the 2 attack every time a mech is summoned, and that card in early Battlegrounds was fairly powerful because you would essentially just buy it, play another mech to give it Divine Shield, and have a decently well-statted minion on its own, and you could, from there, try to find mech summons. There weren't very many of them, depending on the era, especially the beginning ones, and you'd use those summons to get more Divine Shields on Cobalt Guardian to then maybe, have Boulevard trigger again, but also you'd primarily use them to summon minions with Junkbot. Not to summon them with Junkbot, but to summon them for Junkbot. Because Junkbot, when a mech would die, would grow. So if it got hit early, it was a 1/5 that sucked. But if you could have your mechs with Divine Shields get popped, your Boulevard get bigger, your mechs without Divine Shield now die, your Junkbot gets bigger, your mechs that summon thing give your Cobalt Guardians Divine Shield again, so they get popped, which gives Boulevard more attack, and then eventually your Cobalt Guardian and the mech summons that gave it Divine Shield die, and then Junkbot keeps getting bigger, and you get the idea, right? It's all one big synergistic package of Divine Shields, mechs, and fun. It's, I don't know if you've forgotten about these cards. I think you could have forgotten about Cobalt Guardian because it so quickly got one-upped by Deflectobot, and that has been the card that has just stuck around for half a decade after Cobalt Guardian was removed. But Junkbot and Boulevard, kind of underwhelming. Junkbot had some time, but Boulevard I could definitely see you forgetting if it wasn't a constructed card, because it wasn't really in Battlegrounds very long, and it wasn't really all that good. But ultimately, those are some iconic, perhaps forgotten Hearthstone Battlegrounds cards that synergize with each other, containing Divine Shields and mechs, and just a lot of nostalgic fun goodness. Another super fun mech that used to be in Battlegrounds a long time ago was Pogo Hopper. Pogo Hopper, another constructed card. I didn't think I'd have as many on here as I do, but early Battlegrounds was essentially just constructed minions. And so some of the best ones, some of the most nostalgic ones, are inevitably going to be fun to talk about and are going to be remembered finally because they were just really fun. Pogo Hopper gained +2/+2 for each Pogo Hopper you played. So your first one was a 1-mana 1/1, understated, underwhelming. But in early Battlegrounds, even your second one being a 3/3 was an okay statted minion, and everything from there was just better than what the other things were initially early on. And so if you could get this with a card or a hero like Brand Bronzebeard, that could allow you to find more or allow you to trigger the battle cry more times, because it wasn't just like set your stats to 2/2 higher than your last Pogo Hopper, it was gain +2/+2 for each Pogo Hopper. So if you doubled your battle cry, it would do it twice. And because this is Battlegrounds, if you find 3 of them, it triples to a golden Pogo Hopper, which allows you to combine the stats of the first 2 Pogo Hoppers with another 1/1 from the third Pogo Hopper, and then it allows you to use the golden battle cry to trigger even more 2/2s to your Pogo Hoppers. I don't know if there's much of a higher peak in early Battlegrounds than finding a bunch of Pogo Hoppers, or really just one Pogo Hopper, on the hero Jandis and just flipping it back into the shop and just buying it again and just getting bigger and bigger Pogo Hoppers. What a fun time. Very nostalgic for Pogo Hoppers. They just get so large, and they're just, it's like this weird situation where like it's your entire comp and you're just like searching through trying to find the needle in a haystack. You're just rolling and like cycling through minions, really only caring about Pogo Hopper. It's so funny. What a good time, man. The next card is the best card that Hearthstone Battlegrounds has ever seen. A full board of Golden Amalgadons would shiver in their boots when faced up against this mighty foe. One could even say that the stats on the Amalgadon would feel quite insufficient, paling in comparison to the best stats for cost minion the world has ever seen. Boulder Fist Ogre actually was in Battlegrounds. I'm not just trolling. Although it was just a April Fool's Day prank in 2023. It was added to the pool of Battlegrounds and was playable as a tier 3 6/7, which I think at the time might have just been like good stats for the tier, which makes sense because he has good stats for the cost. So you wouldn't want to make it like a 4-drop and have it be balanced. No, you want this to be good stats for the cost. You want it to be really funny that buying a Boulder Fist Ogre is like just legit. Speaking of 2013 in that era, this next card is a bit more recent than previous ones, coming out in 2022, but it's a card I very much enjoy and miss to this day. Walking Fort, a 6-mana minion that at the end of your turn would buff your taunt minions. It wouldn't buff all of them, unfortunately, but it would buff 4 of them. Regular version giving them 4/4. The golden version would give 4 minions 8/8. It's unfortunate it wasn't 8 minions 8/8. That'd be really cool, but for balance reasons, I can kind of understand it. Walking Fort for me was like the perfect Battlegrounds card. It's kind of like what we're doing today with like abusing Drakari Enchanter and having like big fun things happen at the end of the turn. But it was like perfectly balanced for me personally, where it was like not really that good. Like if you got it early in the right scenario, it actually could be your correct move. But most of the time that you were picking Walking Fort and like keeping it around for more than just a little bit of early tempo, you were trolling. But that was perfect because it's like, for whatever reason, sometimes, oddly enough, things that like aren't the best are like more fun, and like you don't have to like worry about other people like stealing them as much, or it's more satisfying to win with them. It's like when a deck gets nerfed in Hearthstone, it's like almost more fun sometimes if like it's now like your hip and cool deck and then not everyone's playing, and it's like more satisfying to win with because it's like, suck it, you lost to a nerf deck. You're playing a meta deck, you're a loser, right? It's like kind of that feeling where it's like really satisfying to play Walking Fort and have it actually work. It's like a challenge in the game, but it's not that crazy of a challenge because the card is just like fine. One such card that I quite frankly did not know existed that you could buff with this card as it is a taunt minion is Tormented Ritualist. This card existed in Battlegrounds as a taunt minion. Whenever this is attacked, give adjacent minions +1/+1 for a little over 8 months, and I have never seen it be played. It's kind of like the 2/3s with taunts we see in recent times where you just like your mind just tunes them out. They're just, oh, that card's unplayable. But like I couldn't even find footage of this card, so I'm just talking about it while I show Walking Fort because it's like this card's never seen play in the history of Battlegrounds ever. But anyway, that's, I mean, in terms of forgotten cards, can you forget a card you didn't know existed? I'm not really sure. Moving on though, a card that also synergized with taunts, but like kind of sort of had taunt itself, was Eliza the Immortal. Elystra the Immortal. I am so sorry. I'm gonna say Eliza just a few times and then I'll figure it out. Just bear with me, all right? Elystra the Immortal. Eliza was a super unique minion in Hearthstone Battlegrounds, and it's kind of crazy to me to think that this card qualifies quite well for a card that could be forgotten because I have a lot of memories of this card, but it was removed from Battlegrounds early 2021. This card was only around for 3 months. The way it works, kind of confusing on its surface, but essentially you put it far right on your board, right? Anytime that you have a taunt minion get attacked, you know, somewhere else in your board, it would instead go and attack the Eliza the Immortal. The reason that you would want a card like this, and the reason why it's like a tier 6 minion when like there's no synergy, it's like a tech card that's tier 6. The reason you'd want a card like this is because what it allowed you to do was passively pop divine shields. So as you're seeing here, you get to attack with your minions as you desire, but every time they attack with their minions, it instead hits Eliza because they can only hit your minions with taunt when you have one alive. So they are forced to instead hit the Elystra. I just realized I've been saying Eliza this whole time because I just talked about pirates a while ago, but this is Elystra the Immortal. I hope I said that right at least one time. Elystra the Immortal would just allow your entire board to just attack and womp the opponent, while their board just attacked your Elystra and then had their divine shields popped. This is just like one of those cards where it's like kind of requires a high level, dare I say, understanding of like the actual fight itself instead of just building a board, like actually figuring out positioning, thinking through attacks. This is one of those cards that you learn by watching someone better than you at the game play on Twitch, right? Or in their videos. Like you see people with 10k MMR buying Elystra and you're like, what? That card's unusable. Why are you buying that? And you're like, oh, okay, fair enough. When you can make boards I can't, you can actually make use of this card. Makes sense, you know? It's like, woo, over my head. Kind of funny. But yeah, a card probably forgotten. Maybe you didn't even know it existed. Elystra the Immortal. That card, despite being a totally valid case for this list, is a card that I am quite and particularly fond of. Another such card that I remember extremely fondly is Red Whelp. Red Whelp is a tier 1 dragon, pretty just, you know, simple baby minion. You see it a lot because you see it often in your beginning of the game because it's tier 1 minion. You would see it a lot of them, and it would deal damage to the opponent based on the dragons you had on your board. It went through a couple changes and iterations, although I think they changed the wording after it was removed, so it doesn't really matter. But it would deal 1 damage for each dragon you had. So if you had 7 dragons, it would deal 7 damage. If you had 2, it would deal 2. If you had 3, it would deal 3. The reason I particularly loved Red Whelp is that like when you had 3 dragons or something, suddenly your 1 drop is actually like a significant unit. But what you're seeing here is just like the funniest way to use Red Whelp, which is to just spam a whole lot of them, and at the start of your turn, just like absolutely devour your opponent's board. I find these interactions, like this type of RNG, to be generally pretty painful and like bad. It's like Knife Juggler RNG. It's very similar. It's like I consider this to be a bad kind of RNG. But when you see something like this, or the People's Champ, the Kaboomba, it's like really funny when you just like snipe your opponent's minions before they even get to attack and it just all falls apart. It's really hilarious. And Red Whelp for me will always hold a spot in my heart. It's just being a goat. He was removed much later than some of these other cards back in 2023, so I don't know if he's been fully forgotten yet, but I think he deserves to be talked about as he's an absolute shad. What a goat, dude. What a fun minion, man. Just super cool. These next 6 cards are cards I had forgotten about. 6? 6, you say? Yes, 6. That may seem like a lot to intro all at once, but that's because, much like the Ziliax Deluxe 3000 in Constructed, that lets you construct different versions of itself with modules to then put in your deck, so too did that flavor used to exist in Battlegrounds with these Ziliax modules. Ziliax Assembled would be the name of the minion, I suppose, the name of the tier 2 minion in Battlegrounds, but the way it worked is that in the shop you would see one of 6 different modules that could all uniquely be tripled together. This was super cool because it was 6 cards that you could buy on their own. You could buy a 2-mana 3/4 with Windfury, or a 2-mana 3/4 with Reborn, probably the best one to buy on its own. Maybe it's the 3/4 with Divine Shield, not sure, but they were all 3/4s. They had either Magnetic, Taunt, Reborn, Divine Shield, Stealth, or Windfury. And what was so cool about these minions is they were all in there in the pool for like your mechs and your tier 2 minions, but they could be uniquely tripled with any of the other modules. You didn't need 3 of the Taunt ones to triple. You could combine a Divine Shield, a Reborn, and a Windfury to a triple, get your triple reward, but then have your Ziliax Assembler on the board be a combination of those minions and have Magnetic, Divine Shield, Windfury, whatever, and just be a really powerful minion. And in the case of Magnetic, you could use it to then buff a minion to be a really powerful minion. I don't know if people have forgotten about this because of how much Ziliax exists in the game, and because it was fairly recent, all things considered. These modules were actually in 2024, a little over a year ago, but only existed for a few months. I'm like having a fever dream. I'm like reading the wiki and it's like, this was 2024, and I'm just like, what? Are we sure? I feel like I played these a decade ago. You're telling me it was like less than a year ago that they took these out? I don't buy it. Something seems fishy here. Something seems fishy here. So this may be like the worst inclusion on this entire list, but it is super cool that like these modules did exist, and I'm a big fan of them for existing, but I feel like when they were removed may be wrong on this also. It doesn't really matter. I'm talking about them because they're cool, and I had forgotten about them actually. I had been like talking in recent videos about Ziliax Deluxe 3000 and just regular Ziliax, and I did not even realize that these existed. I saw them on the removed cards list and it was like immediately flooded with, oh wow, yeah, that was interesting. I remember those. So whether you've forgotten about it or not, that is a super unique situation that Battlegrounds hasn't seen since, and I loved it. Last, but certainly not least, one of Hearthstone Battlegrounds' most iconic, perhaps most infamous card from Hearthstone's early days, being released almost 5 years ago, is the Tide Razor. Is Yepboat. Tide Razor, commonly referred to by the community as Yepboat, is the ultimate early scam minion. Early being timeline-wise, not in the game-wise, because it is a Tavern 6 minion that would death rattle, summon random pirates, and just flood your board. It's essentially a pinata that your opponent didn't want to pop unless they were going to win the fight by enough to also kill the random pirates, right? Because say you trade your whole boards evenly, you're like, whew, got out by the skin of my teeth, and then the Tide Razor pops, and out comes 3 tier 6 pirates. You just die. It's like, oh, that's stupid, right? Even tier 3 pirates has 9 damage added to the board. So this card not only was just a lot of stats potentially for the time, but allowed you to have potential to scam in a way that gave it the nickname Yepboat, because if you're watching this on Twitch, you got the boat, right? We're simple people, us Twitch chatters, right? It's a boat, so we call it boat. And then the Yeppa mode is the cute frog that's smiling, right? He's all happy. And so when the boat would scam, you'd be like, yep, that's the boat. Yep, boat. It's doing its thing. It's doing the job it's supposed to do. You're popping it in your board at the end after you got all your amalgams or your big murlocs or whatever the heck you were actually doing. And then if that wasn't enough, you had the boat there to just be silly and do crazy powerful things and to just blow up the opponent with. And if you golden this, you fill your whole board with pirates. And so if it dies last, your entire board gets filled with random pirates. Just absolutely hilarious. Yep, boat. Tide Razor, one of the most iconic Hearthstone Battlegrounds early day cards. If you did forget about him, now you remember him, and you got to go down this nostalgic trip down memory lane with me. I hope you enjoyed me looking at some of the forgotten Hearthstone Battlegrounds minions, and above all, don't forget to subscribe to see more awesome Hearthstone content.
Oh! 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 Hey, that was pretty good. worked out okay. 4.3%er.
The C7 Max comes with a 30-day return policy for a risk-free trial and a 10-year warranty with direct replacement for damaged parts. Be sure to use my code in the description to get the best price.
Bye-bye.